I discovered Power Apps, and I was like, okay, this is interesting. This is sort of like web development, but in a really strange manner.
Why are these two things closely related?
If you look at a Power Apps developer versus a web developer, the web developer would need to know more and they would get paid either the same or get paid less money.
Copilot within the Power Platform, it continues to break down like the barrier of entry.
The fundamentals are brilliant. You can pick them up quite quickly and they will give you that foundational knowledge on whatever the topic is.
What was something that when you got into your career, you were like, oh, snap?
The certifications just...
Hey, welcome to this week's episode of Power Talks. My name is Griffin, the host of the Citizen Developer channel, and today I am joined by special guest Charles Sexton. Now, Charlie is a senior Power Platform developer and consultant at Bridgeall, which is an IT consulting firm and Microsoft partner that brings businesses SharePoint, Teams, M365, and Power Platform solutions. From speaking engagements to creating YouTube content, to holding, by my count, 9 different Microsoft certifications, Charles is nothing short of an expert. And Charlie has a crazy story in which he went from having 0 Power Platform experience to a senior Power Platform consultant in as little as 6 months. To add even more, this was only about 2 years ago, and he now finds himself as a Microsoft MVP. He says, and I quote, "Power Platform has completely changed my working life, improving my confidence, building my friendships, and giving my career much more potential than before." Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Griffin. That was an amazing introduction. I've actually been watching your YouTube channel for a while. I think it was Anna Black who introduced it to me, and this was before she appeared. And yeah, I've been enjoying it, so it's great to be here.
That's awesome. Yeah, I've been really enjoying it. I never really, growing up, I never thought I was a creative person, but I think now that I'm a little older, I find that I am, and it allows me to have a little bit of a creative outlet, I guess. And having conversations like this, I find, are a little bit more fun than how to install this Power Apps control on your form. You know, it's great and all. You know, go check out the video, but you know what I mean.
Nice to have some variation. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, and just have some deeper connections with people in the space and everything, but. You know, I'm beyond eager to learn about your journey into the Power Platform. But first, in getting to know you, you've mentioned that you have, you kind of specialize, I'll call it, in the realm of Canvas apps. Now, I must admit, I don't necessarily have a ton of Canvas app experience, but I'm interested to hear why you fell into Canvas apps and why you enjoy developing them.
Yeah, sure. So when I found out about Power Platform, originally it was actually Dynamics that I found out about, because the company that I was working for, this was the energy consultancy company, they wanted to use more of the Microsoft technology stack because they were already using Microsoft products. And so they asked me to look into how I could utilize customer service, the customer service app in Dynamics. So I went ahead and got it installed and customized it a little bit and did some training videos teaching people how to use it, you know, with Outlook integration and things like that, SharePoint integration. So that was actually my first foray into Power Platform. But around the same kind of time as playing around with that, I discovered Power Apps. And I was like, okay, this is interesting because this is sort of like web development, but in a really strange manner. And so I got more excitement, I suppose, from Canvas apps than I did from Dynamics and from model-driven apps, because it was more closely aligned to web development. So I could create the user interface, which I really enjoy doing, and I could also write some code, which I also really enjoy doing. So it kind of scratched the itches that I had.
Yeah, what kind of skills that you think you had learned in this, you know, maybe more technical background of a web developer that transferred well into Canvas app development? Like, why are these two things, you know, closely related?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's a great question. It comes around to every part of it, I suppose. So whether it's working with data, so I'd already worked with data and web development with a SQL database. So Dataverse is just another SQL database under the hood. It's just with a different layer on top, and you can do more things with it. And the same with a Canvas app. So it's basically HTML and CSS under the hood, but we're being given an easier way to deal with it. So it's just another layer on top of web development, really. And so that's why I think that it was easy for me to understand what was going on and to pick up how to start manipulating things.
Yeah, what did you specifically do to learn what you needed to with Canvas apps? Like maybe what did you do? Where did you go? Was it just I found some really good YouTube creators, or was it like I spun up a trial and just like, you know, beat my head against the wall until I figured it out? Or I mean, what's kind of your experience with learning how to do this, and maybe some advice that you'd have with other people that, their interest is now peaked into Canvas apps?
Yeah, it was a mix of things. So initially, I created that generic Canvas app that everyone does when they go through the Microsoft Learn path. So I was going through those Learn paths. So partly to learn how to do it, but also partly because I wanted to get some certifications in it, because I felt like that would ensure that I learned what I needed to learn in order to do the things I wanted to do. So yeah, initially with the Learn path, started building things. And then where I got stuck, I was either searching on the internet and then finding maybe Microsoft Community Forum posts where people had answered those questions. Or sometimes it was coming up with YouTube videos. And then I was discovering YouTubers who were creating tutorials. And so then I was going and subscribing to as many as possible. So it was the main people who most people would discover, people like Shane Young and Reza Durrani and others. And yeah, I was just devouring their content, just watching video after video, learning all kinds of cool things and trying them out. So yeah, a mix of things. The Microsoft Learn paths are really, really good. The documentation is really good as well. So if you're wanting to learn about Power Effects, all of the functions are listed with examples, and they explain everything about it, really. And yeah, YouTube and reading articles as well is really good.
Yeah, I would have to agree with what you say there about the Microsoft Learn. I think that, I don't know, maybe if I doubt Microsoft is listening, but sometimes people take a
They might
jab at
be.
Microsoft whenever they can. It's like, well, Microsoft. I feel like maybe it's just the joke, but I do have to give them credit where credit's due, in that the Microsoft Learn modules, I think, are super beneficial, especially, I mean, those carry the majority of my like certification studying, right? Because on a lot of the certifications, if you scroll down, it'll kind of provide 8 different modules or something like that, that you can go through, and there's little mini questionnaires in them, and steps to go and create things as well. I mean, I, I'm interested as well. You mentioned getting certifications and using these modules to do so. I mean, quick tangent here. What's kind of like your Microsoft certification study process, and why do you feel like yeah, I guess I'll just give you the floor there with that.
Okay, yeah, sure. So my process is probably very similar to yours, actually, which is going through that Learn path that they talk about on the certification page. So yeah, going through it module by module. And if there are parts that I find that are confusing to me, sometimes I'll just go through them quickly because I feel like I don't have the mental capacity to take it in at that time. Or sometimes I'll decide that I need to do more than just stay on that Learn path with it. So maybe I need to go and start creating something or delving into the configuration to try and figure out what are they talking about? How can I make this make sense to me? But essentially, it's that kind of process of going through the Learn path, doing things. So if you're working in the space, it's much easier because you're getting experience through your job. If you're not, then I would think of use cases for myself. So can I create an app that can help me in some way? Or can I create an app that's about something that's interesting to me? Just some way of making it so that I don't need to have discipline. I can feel more motivated through excitement. And yeah, basically that. And then nowadays you have the assessments on the certification pages as well. So going through those assessments, you get to just learn through doing lots of quizzes, lots of exams.
Yeah. Do you remember which certification was the first one you had gotten?
Yeah, it would have been the fundamentals.
Is that the
Yeah.
900
Power
by chance?
Platform
PL?
Fundament. Yeah, PL
Yeah,
900.
I know I am not trying to, toot my own horn here or anything, but to anybody out there who doesn't have a certification and is still listening to the video or watching the video, I was able to go from not knowing what the Power Platform was to having the PL 900 in about a week. Just like
Wow.
going through the, I mean, and I was very spoiled in my situation. I had the ability to like just dedicate a ton of time to learning the Power Platform and everything. So I understand that people have responsibilities, but like I think the term certification, and Microsoft definitely has some certifications that you can't just pick up and go crush out. But I think there's some of these that are very attainable, like the PL 900. The PL 100 kind of comes to mind. It's not, I mean, that starts to get in, you definitely need some hands-on experience with Canvas apps and things, but the PL 100, and even starting to get into like the PL 200, I feel like these are something that you don't have to dedicate, years of your life to do, right? And so I guess kind of what are your thoughts there of just like, I don't know, what was your experience and you're kind of touching on this, but like your overall maybe opinion on these certifications and different things and like why you feel like that they're beneficial to have if you're looking to get into the space.
Hmm. Yeah, the fundamentals are brilliant because, like you say, you can pick them up quite quickly and they will give you that foundational knowledge on whatever the topic is. So if it's the Azure fundamentals, then it gives you the foundational knowledge on that. If it's Power Platform, then on that. And then you can start building on top of that knowledge with the other certifications. So the first bit is the foundational knowledge. So that will give you an idea as to basically what's possible, what's available to you within that technology stack. And then the ones that build on top of that will give you a bit more specialist knowledge and really start to push you into the realms of becoming a professional in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a question and now I feel like I have no longer holding on. Oh, I remember it. Okay. So I remember too when I was very early on taking these certifications that I had a mentor of mine and he was an architect and he had said something along the lines of like, look, certifications are great. I am not saying not to get a certification. But at the end of the day, experience might, tends to weigh more than, oh, you have the PL 100. Okay, but what Canvas apps have you actually built? Um, so kind of what's your experience with that? I mean, you had these certifications without maybe a ton of experience in the field. How did that impact your career journey? Let me start with that question. Yeah, how did that impact?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think that in an ideal world, you want someone who has both. So you want them to have that knowledge from the certification and the experience from actually doing something. Because there are people out there who will have just done the certifications, they have the knowledge, but they can't actually do the job because they've never done it before. Or maybe they haven't done it before, so they haven't experienced the nuances that you might get when you're creating an app, that kind of thing. But then on the flip side, you don't necessarily want someone who's just got the experience because they might have missed something, some piece of knowledge. It can be, so it's not necessarily that there might be something that they could have learned to do, but it might be that there's a tip that they missed from one of the learn paths. I've got so many tips that I found from those learn paths. Just simple things that you would overlook if it was just down to experience. So I think, yeah, definitely in an ideal world, you get both of them.
Yeah, what I had to write this question down because I didn't want to forget it. But what is something that the certifications did not prepare you well for? Like, what was something that when you got into your career, you were like, "Oh, snap!" Like, I was not prepared for this.
Hmm. Um,
This is one that's on the spot too, so
yeah. I
totally get
think
it.
the certifications just they always just give you some knowledge. So they're never going to tell you exactly how to do something. So you are always finding your way in some way when you're building something, because a lot of the time you will you'll be working on something and I'm trying to find the right train of thought here. So you'll be working on something and you'll come up against something that won't be in the learn path, and then you'll have to find your way around it. So that will be through perhaps searching on the internet or looking for a tutorial video that explains it, but it won't be in that learn path and it won't be in that certification. So you're always going to hit upon those kind of brick walls that don't get covered by any documentation.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, that does. I think like, I don't know, I like something that I guess for me, I just remember like, I feel like I'm still learning a lot about Power Automate, right? And I don't think that there's not really like a Power Automate certification per se, you know? Maybe there is,
Yeah.
I'm just not aware of it.
No.
But like, so I find that even though I, had studied the Power Platform fundamentals, like I had kind of understood what Power Automate can do and what it can accomplish and kind of how it works with the different triggers and actions, that I was by no means a Power Automate expert, and I still am not, right? But by no means a Power Automate expert. And I think that would be fair to say with, with model-driven apps, with Canvas apps, with everything else. Because one thing that, like, I guess I'm also thinking about is, the certifications and the Learn modules are talking about everything that the Power Platform can do. Something that it might not always explicitly say are things that it can't do, like things it cannot do. So, like just the limitations with like the out-of-the-box business rules and stuff like that, or the business rules within the Power Platform and different things come to mind. If you are thinking to yourself that you want to get into low-code development or learn about the Power Platform, then I want to personally invite you to sign up for this completely free self-paced course that is going to cover everything you need to know to begin low-code development today. Not too long ago, I was a complete beginner and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what the Power Platform was. But in just 2 years, I have gone from being an associate to a senior level consultant, and I can truly say that I love what I do. The content in this course is handpicked by me so you can understand the basics of the Power Platform and ultimately be prepared to take the PL 900 certification if that's something you're interested in. If you are interested, be sure to follow the first link in the description down below, and do not forget to use the promo code YouTube at checkout in order to get the course for completely free. This is going to give you immediate access to the entire course so that you can start to change your future today. Now, let's get back to the conversation. I really appreciate this tangent, but I wanted to take it back to Canvas apps, kind of where we were a couple minutes ago. You very briefly mentioned, and you've mentioned to me before, that you are super passionate about UI UX, especially when it comes to Canvas apps. I mean, when it comes to model-driven apps, yeah, you can, customize the form, you can show hide fields, you can maybe add a toggle control or different things, but largely, the experience is fairly set. There's not a ton of customizations, but how is that different, and why is UI UX particularly important with Canvas apps?
Yeah, I think with Canvas apps, you can go wrong very easily because you're given this blank canvas. It's just a white screen in front of you, and you have to start putting things on it. So it's completely up to the developer or the maker as to what they're going to do with it. So it means that the majority of people, because they don't have design knowledge and experience and usability experience and also accessibility knowledge, that they typically end up creating something that's not very good from a user's perspective. So maybe it does the job, but when you hand it off to someone for them to use it, they look at it and they think, oh, that doesn't look very good. And then they start using it and they think, well, this doesn't feel good. Or maybe it might be someone that has some kind of accessibility issue, temporarily or permanently, and maybe they can't even use it at all, or maybe they're confused. So it might be that they have color blindness and there's a button and they can't see what color the button is. So they don't know from the color as to whether it's a good or a bad button. It can be that kind of thing. So it goes into all the way from let's make something look nice so that it's professional, so it gives off the right image for our company, all the way through to I can't actually even use this, so this is a problem.
What are some I guess you were starting to share some of them, but what are some additional tips and tricks that people should, maybe some easy wins that people can keep in mind for when they're developing Canvas apps?
So, just in a general sense, so ignoring the UI and UX perspective, just in a general sense with Canvas apps, because they're single page applications, when someone loads that Canvas app, they're loading the entirety of the app. So, like with a model driven app, when you click on a page, it loads just that one page, and you don't have to worry about the other pages. They're not going to impact on the performance. But with a Canvas app, every single screen that you add to that Canvas app is going to get bundled into it, and it's going to impact on the performance. So by far my biggest tip to anyone working with Canvas apps is, if they're not aware, keep Canvas apps really small and really focused. So rather than have one Canvas app that can do 5 different things, it's much better to have 5 different Canvas apps that focus on a particular goal. So you might, if you have different types of users, say you have someone working in a warehouse and someone outside the warehouse who's working in security, and they both need to access the same Dataverse tables. So one person's recording a delivery coming in, for example, and then the person in the warehouse is processing that delivery. Give them both separate Canvas apps, because they don't need to have the same Canvas app, and then they can focus on their own tasks and they'll be much more performant. So I think by far and away, that's my number one tip for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. What about some UI UX tips as well? Some less general.
Yeah, okay. Wow, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah,
So
take all the
probably,
time you need. Yeah.
okay, cool. So probably the first thing I'd say is give the content room to breathe. So people can quite often pack so much content into a tiny space and pack in as much as they possibly can. But the best thing to do is to give it more padding than you think that it needs, or more spacing than you think that it needs. And it will feel much cleaner and fresher. And another thing I'd say is, don't overload it with too many colors. If you're someone who's not really design savvy, stick to 1 or 2 colors. I think probably those are 2 of the biggest things. And then other things would be, just keep it simple. Don't use too many fonts, don't use too many different styles, and keep it consistent. So in Canvas apps, we can create things called components, which is where you can create your own control or your own set of controls, and then you can reuse it over and over. So it means that you create it once, it has a particular look, and whenever you reuse it, you're reusing that look. So you get consistency in your design. So yeah, give things room to breathe and keep it consistent. Probably the main 2.
I love it. I feel like I would definitely fall short on that first one. I think I have a tendency to like just want to put everything, it's less clicks, like that's kind of something you want to think about, I guess, in like a CRM or different things. You want less clicks, and especially for sales implementations, right? Salespeople hate clicks, but especially when it comes to Canvas apps, it's almost like it's this dance. It's kind of what I think you're alluding to, right?
It's a balance, yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Very, very cool. I don't think I could possibly even try to add any expertise that you're saying there. I would love to transition the conversation and talk a little bit more about your career and how you got into the Power Platform. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think I wrote down some notes here at a high level, kind of your journey. So you became interested in web development and design as a teenager, and then you had a passion for songwriting, and that's kind of where you started your career. You then transitioned to a web app developer at an energy consulting firm that you briefly mentioned, and where you then learned or were introduced to the Power Platform. I mean, would you mind sharing more? I feel like I would love to, who is Charlie, and kind of how you have gotten to where you are today.
Yeah, I think that's one of the really cool things about Power Platform is you get people from all walks of life and so many different career switches. So my journey is a bit more like traditional web development into Power Platform, but it's not really quite as simple as that. So yeah, when I was a teenager, I was really passionate and excited about music, writing music and playing guitar and singing. And I went to work for a recording studio. And with the recording studio, I thought I would be doing more music things, but I actually ended up doing more technological things. So I was doing things like they had a publishing arm to the company, so I was providing music to iTunes. Also, I was doing things like building web apps for them to help them with their processes. So they would have people who would book time in the studio, and I had this kind of job management system that I built for them to track everything, including tracking how much money they were making, that kind of stuff. And at some point, I just realized that I wasn't quite happy in the job. My boss wasn't really the kindest person, and it wasn't the best lifestyle for me. So I decided to move on from that. And I basically just fell into the energy consultancy side because my mum was dating a guy who owned an energy consultancy company. So I was working for them part time, building web apps again. So this time, not web apps to do with music, but web apps to do with energy. But it's the same kind of thing, really. It's just you're processing data in some particular way. And they liked what I did for them. So they brought me on full time and permanently. And I ended up being there for almost 15 years. And 2 years before I left, he was my stepfather at this point. He sold the company. And the person who bought the company was the one who said, yeah, let's start using more of the Microsoft tech stack. And then that's what led me into Power Platform. And yeah, I was learning Power Platform, I think, for just a few months even before I started applying for jobs. And it was, I think, because of my web development knowledge prior to that, that I was able to go into a senior role straight away. But I also do think I got very lucky. The time when I was looking for a job, it seemed like it was very easy to get a job in Power Platform. I had three options at the time. So one was with working for a bank, and they declined to go ahead with me, I think, just because of my experience. And then the other one was a nuclear decommissioning company, which is quite an interesting one. I guess it kind of ties in with the energy consultancy side. And they were an option for me, but Bridgel just seemed like the best career path for me. So going to a Microsoft partner, I would get loads of experience, work on lots of different projects. And it seemed like that would be the place to better springboard my career to wherever I'm going next.
Absolutely. So it sounds like that kind of once you learned about the Power Platform, you were like all in, right? I mean, was there
Oh,
a
yeah.
time where you were like, yeah, I think the answer to this is no. There wasn't a time where, that you look back on, you're like, oh, I wish I would have gotten into it sooner, or anything like that. Because it kind of sounds like in hearing your story that it was like once you knew it was out there, you were like, let's go.
That's basically it. Yeah. As soon as I knew about it, if I would have loved to have known about it earlier, because then I could be further along than where I am today. But also on the flip side of that, if I think about it, there are so many features that got introduced by the time that I started learning about it that I would have been really frustrated not to have prior to that. So in some ways, maybe it was the perfect time for me to join the party, because by that point, Power Apps development, I think, was really fun. And maybe prior to that, there were a few more frustrations with it. And actually looking at it from a future perspective. So say that there's someone watching this video now or watching your video on how to get into Power Platform consultancy, that if they're watching that video now and looking at it and thinking about joining this party that we have, having a career in Power Platform, I think now might actually be an even better time, because say for Canvas apps, we've got things like being able to edit the code behind the code that we're doing. So it's all written in YAML under the hood, and we're now getting access to view that YAML code and copy it and paste it. So we're getting to the point now where we can start generating apps ourselves. So like with a model-driven app, how it's basically generated based on what's in Dataverse, we could generate Canvas apps depending on what we've set up. And co-authoring is a big one. So in a model-driven app, you can already do co-authoring. You can both be in the app at the same time and modify things. In Canvas apps, you can't really do that. Microsoft tried to implement it, but it didn't quite work, and there were lots of problems with it. But because they've implemented this ability to see the code, they've changed how things work under the hood, and we've got co-authoring coming. So this is an amazing time to start stepping into Power Platform, learning how it all works, and having less frustrations than the people before you had.
Yeah, I feel like you were starting to touch on this. I mean, what what kind of advice would you have for somebody who is, in the same situation you were in, say, 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, where they're not necessarily not liking what they're doing, but, again, their interest is piqued into this space and different things. What advice would you have for somebody like that?
If it's someone with the same mindset as me, so if they have looked at Power Platform or Power Apps in particular, and they find it interesting and they think that they could be passionate about it, then my advice would be to go all in, just enjoy the journey. So if you're enjoying it, start building things, have fun with it. Really just enjoy that process and go off and do things that you find interesting. So if someone wants to work in Power Platform, are Canvas apps the things that you're interested in, or is it model-driven apps, or is it dynamics? There's so much to Power Platform. Maybe someone's got a particular interest in artificial intelligence, so then why not go off and look at Copilot Studio? Maybe you can be an expert in Copilot Studio. But yeah, essentially within 6 months, you can learn so much in the space that you could then potentially, after the 6 months, get a job in it, and that's your career sorted. And as you touched on this in a previous video, which is to do with the salaries, and that Power Platform salaries pay very well. If you look at a Power Apps developer versus a web developer, I would say that the web developer would need to know more, far more, and they would get paid either the same or get paid less money than a Power Apps developer.
I would say I completely agree with kind of the sentiment there, those last few sentences that you were saying. But I do think that a lot of times you have the opportunity in this space to not always be okay, here, how do I want to rephrase this? Early on, I heard some advice that, consultants in this space are just great Googlers. And I think while there is some truth to that, because, stuff is always changing, like you're saying. But at the same time, there is a time and a place to be an expert and to be able to speak to the business value that Microsoft Dynamics or Copilot or, Power Apps brings to businesses. So I'm not trying to discredit the experts out there or anything like that, or say that you don't need to be an expert and you can, be paid like an expert. But I do think there is an opportunity where, you don't have to have 20 years of coding experience, right, to be successful in the Power Platform. I don't know if you have any other thoughts on that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's space for everyone. So whether it's someone who has 6 months worth of knowledge in Copilot Studio and that's the way that they want to push their career, or whether it's someone who has loads of programming knowledge to do with .NET and maybe they're dealing with artificial intelligence through their programming. Both people have something to offer in different ways. So yeah, definitely there's something out there for everyone. And it's like with Power Platform, there are so many parts to it. Maybe it might be someone who really enjoys the Power Automate side of it, but not the others. So yeah, why not specialize in Power Automate? Working for a Microsoft consultancy, you can very easily just focus on Power Automate and you'll have teammates who will work on the other parts of Power Platform. And yet you don't need to have years worth of experience. It might just be 6 months and you can do the job you need to do.
Yeah. That spurs two questions. So we'll take this first one. I think that kind of what you're saying of, just be great at Power Automate. That was some other advice I had heard, was like, find something that I'm passionate about and that I like and just like become the guru at that one thing. And I think that sometimes we can think that the Power Platform at the end of the day, there's so many different things within it. A lot of times we can, at least I believe sometimes, that I like to think that the Power Platform is the niche, but the reality is like that is still potentially too broad, right? I'm good friends and with Joe Unwin, or Flo Joe as people know him. He was episode 1 of the Power Talks, and the reality is, he is the Power Automate guru, and you might be even to take it lower as like the Power Automate function guru. Like if I have any question on how to do a Power Automate function, I know exactly where to go. Or you could become the Canvas app guru, or you could become the UI UX of Canvas app guru, right? And just kind of different things. So, and or it could be, you're really passionate and you have a background in customer service. Let me be really passionate about Microsoft Dynamics customer service implementations and making this the best possible customer care solution for people. And so that was kind of some advice that I had, and I think I'm still trying to hammer it out. I find I enjoy, maybe it's just salespeople's personalities and see myself in some of them are being outgoing. I do enjoy working with sales implementations. I also am really enjoying, like, who isn't really enjoying learning about Copilot and just large language models in general, and just the impacts that those are going to have on people, on businesses, etc. And so that kind of spurs my next, I guess, thought is, you mentioned, Copilot Studio. I feel like Copilot finds a way to work into every one of these episodes. I mean, have you had any time to click around with Copilot Studio and any experience with that? Or what are you excited about for the realm of Copilot as it makes its way into the Power Platform?
Yeah, I've only dabbled with it. So just connecting to different data sources, whether it's SharePoint or documents or Dataverse, and just asking it questions and seeing how it deals with that, how it handles it. I've seen talks on it, so where people have extended the chat in Teams in order to get answers from it using a custom Copilot, but haven't done anything really too much. I mean, we have Copilots in Power Apps, of course. Like, you open up a model-driven app and you can instantly start talking to your data. And I think that's incredible. And we don't actually have to do anything to make that happen, just make sure that it's enabled. So, yeah, it's a really interesting space. And I think it's going to open up a whole host of other, maybe it's job roles or maybe it's just opportunities for people. And that's very interesting. And even from the perspective of, say, me being a Canvas app person, Copilot can generate Canvas apps. So to what level is it going to go to with that? At the moment, it does very basic Canvas apps, but that's not going to be the case forever. At some point, it will start to do more and more clever apps. So initially, they started off with, okay, it can generate a page and a Dataverse table. But then now we've moved on to it can do multiple Dataverse tables. And it's going to get further than that. It will start to be able to do complex relationships. And the very interesting part from the perspective of a Canvas app is, to what level can it go with the user interface and the user experience? Because that's really where you need a personal element to it, because you need to know what it feels like and you need to have some human thought into it, I think. But yeah, it'll be very interesting to see where that goes.
Yeah, I would agree that I think I'll call them customer facing Copilots, like Copilot for M365, Copilot for dynamic sales, where, like, these are ready today pretty much, right? Where you can begin to implement them into your business process. The Copilot for customer service, which is kind of a repackaged Copilot for sales, just brought over to the customer service app. I don't know exactly how new this is, but I think it's within the last month, or like the last 6 weeks potentially. And so there are still a lot of features that I don't know if I would say that that's completely, ready to go. It's just fairly limited in its scope. But nonetheless, Microsoft has communicated, these features are coming, the ability to do these things are coming. And if you look at where sales was, the Sales Copilot 6 months ago to where it is now, it arguably is unrecognizable. And I think that, I just think that I had a really good conversation with Chris Huntingford of just like, how can you even begin to implement this into your business process? Like, we don't even understand all of the ways that we can begin to use this, I feel like, right now. And so on the other side of that, though, kind of like internally, the Copilot within the Power Platform, as you're mentioning, I remember when they first announced this, probably, I don't know, 8 months ago, 6 months ago now, and I created a couple videos on, creating a Power Automate flow with Copilot, creating a Canvas app with Copilot. And at least at that point in time, I haven't used it since, but at least at that point in time, it was nice to, like, get your app like from 0 to 1, so to speak. Like get a couple screens, get some buttons, some whatever. Get it related to the table or tables that you needed. But other than that, it was fairly limited. It was like, okay, I could ask Copilot to change the size of this text, but ultimately I could just change the size of the text. It wouldn't, it doesn't save me any time. But I think that it continues to break down like the barrier of entry into getting into the space, right? And I don't necessarily need to know how to maybe write PowerFX functions. I just need to know how to prompt Copilot to write PowerFX functions, right, in natural language. Yeah, I don't know. Have you any other thoughts there to add? I know there's not a question, but any your experience with that and your excitement?
Yeah, great insights. Completely agree with what you're saying. I suppose there are two parts to it. There's one part which is someone who doesn't have any experience at all. And then there's the other side, which is someone who is experienced and what can Copilot do for them. So the inexperienced person, it can help kind of guide them along the way. They can talk to it and it can do things for them. And as you say, as long as the prompts are working with the large language model, then it will be fine and it will do what you want. At some point, maybe it won't do what the person's asking for and then they'll get stuck. So then they'll need some expertise. And then looking at it from the perspective of the expert or the professional, Copilot can be something that can accelerate what they're trying to do. So it can do all of the boring things that they do every single time, and they don't want to have to do every single time. And it will do that quick start for them, and then they're straight into the gritty details, the things that they want to work on.
Yeah, I mean, if you think you know your personal touch that you have on all of your emails is required by you to write them, and Copilot can't take some of that load and create some at least the rough drafts for you, I think you might be missing out. I don't know. I can just hear people like my parents tend to be pretty tech savvy, whatever, but I can hear people the same age as my parents of like, oh well, AI is it can't do what I do, whatever. But I would argue, when it comes to writing emails, it probably can. So super. Go ahead, take it.
Yeah, I was just going to say on the email front. So I don't know how advanced this is yet, but it's supposed to be able to read your emails and understand your writing style, isn't it? So as long as it's writing those emails in your style, it makes no difference whether it's you writing it or it's Copilot writing it. Of course, you'll double check it because it's AI and it might make mistakes or it might not be saying things in the way you want to say it. But as long as you've double checked it, yeah, why not get AI to do it for you? Because there's no benefit to you writing it all out yourself. You're just wasting your time.
Absolutely, and I think yeah, I mean if it has the context of all of your email threads, which are in Outlook, right? I mean, then it would understand exactly how you speak and everything. I think, yeah, I've said before, like, you know, the value you bring to your employer or the people that you work for or yourself or your business or whatever, the value that you bring is not in your ability to write emails. It's not in your ability to get mundane tasks done. It's to close deals. It's to, build customer relationships. It's to provide business value, right? And so any tool or any process that we can do to allow us to have more time doing those things that we're good at, then the better. I think this is great. I don't know if you have anything else to add there, but I would love to transition us, sit back, kick our feet up to kind of the conclusion of the show, the after hours, happy hour segment of the show. And just continuing to getting to know you, Charlie. Charlie, you are like super personable and just easy to talk to. I hope you know
Thank
that.
you.
Not that any guests haven't been, but it's been great getting to talk to you. And I love hearing more about you. You mentioned that you've kind of lived in some interesting places and you also enjoy some casual video games. I mean, I just want to give you the floor. What are some cool places that you've kind of lived?
Yeah, I've actually moved around a lot in my life. And it started just before I turned 6 years old. So my parents took myself, my older brother, and my younger sister over to Uganda in Africa. And we lived there for 4 years. And it was a crazy time. One of the things I wanted to mention with that actually was that I had some interesting pets. So one of the pets that I had, I don't know if you would call it a pet because it's a wild animal, but it was a chameleon or multiple chameleons.
Sure.
So I was really scared of them. I was, I don't know, 6 or 7 years old. And my brother, who was 2 years older, encouraged me to be less scared. And I ended up picking up a chameleon at some point. And we were in a taxi on the way home. And I had the chameleon in my hands. And it was a green chameleon with a, I don't know if it was yellow or orange stripe, that kind of thing, down its sides. And it suddenly jumped off my hands onto my chest and shocked me. And so that was when I thought of the name for it. Okay, this is Jumping Jack Flash, because he has the flash down his side and he jumps. So Jumping Jack, yeah, why not? And so, yeah, we ended up having chameleons kind of as pets, but also as wild. Like we would just put them in the bushes outside in the garden. My mum would get the chameleon, bring it inside to wherever there were flies, and then just hold it up to the fly and it would eat them.
Yeah.
So it's quite a nice cycle, I suppose. And they ended up having babies in the bushes outside as well. So there were these really tiny chameleons in the bushes, tons of them. So
Super
really cool experiences from that. So with my personal website, charlessexton.com, my logo is a chameleon. So it's partly because of that, but also, I don't believe in star signs or zodiac signs or whatever, but whenever you read about my zodiac sign, so a Gemini, it always talks about them being a kind of chameleon of the social world or something like that. I don't think it really applies to me, but just because I guess I just keep being bombarded with chameleon, and it's like, okay, let's use that. So that's my animal for some reason.
That's fun.
But
yeah.
Also, I had a pet monkey in Uganda as well. So yeah, it was a completely crazy time. And since then, I have moved around a lot. So I also spent months living in Hungary with my ex. So yeah, I've managed to have quite a few experiences. Originally, I'm from a place in the south of the UK, but then I ended up living in the east of the UK and went back to the south, lived in London for a bit, and then now I'm in the middle. And I kind of just fell into where I'm living right now. It wasn't an active choice, but you have those DNA tests that you can do. So I did a 23andMe DNA test. It's like, do I have any half siblings? Okay, no, I don't. Because you just never know what's going to happen, what's going to rock the family. But yeah, nothing like that happened. But it now says on 23andMe that my DNA actually dates back to where I'm living right now, even though no one in my family lives here. So it's quite weird. It's kind of like I gravitated towards coming home in a sense.
Yeah, very cool. No, that's super interesting. I guess I've really only lived in two places. I grew up in Indiana, obviously in the United States, and then for college I had moved to the University of North Dakota. So I've moved to the tropical booming metropolis that is North Dakota. Kidding. No, I live in North Dakota, but it's obviously not tropical. But nonetheless, we're here. I mean, my wife is going to grad school still, and we're here, and so only those two spots. I'm Midwest, as we call it. These states are both in the Midwest. My wife is from California originally, so she's a West Coast girly. But we don't know. We don't necessarily know. Some fun, life, exciting. Kind of when she's done with school, of thinking about where we might want to go. And I mean, we're all over the map right now. So, I mean, who knows? We love the idea of traveling and going cool places and different things, but that's super cool. You've had that opportunity. Also, real briefly, I mean, you mentioned you're a casual video game player. I would say I'm about as casual. I used to be a lot more into them before I got married. That's not a jab. My wife, but before I got married, I used to spent more time on them. But, I mean, what kind of casual video games do you like to play, Charlie?
I don't know if you can see above my head up there, that little guy.
Sure.
He's a little PUBG character. So it's PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. So it's basically, for anyone who's watched the Hunger Games, it's like being in the Hunger Games. So you parachute onto this island and it's a fight for survival. And you can play just as a solo, so just on your own, but I don't enjoy that. I find that I get jump scares. Yeah. So it will be really quiet. You'll hear the whistling of the wind or maybe the rain, and then all of a sudden you'll hear shooting and someone's attacking you. And I don't really enjoy that aspect. It's not good for your heart. So I just like playing with my friends. So I've got 3 other people typically who I play with. So we play as a squad of 4. And yeah, we just go around having fun, picking up weapons and stuff. And yeah, it's cool.
Very fun. Yeah, those battle royales, right, as people call them, I think are super popular. I had, again, me and 2 buddies, we were running trios on Warzone back in the day, a couple years ago. I don't know how many hours I sunk into Warzone trios with those 2 fellas, right? But
it's great fun, and it's so addictive.
It is, especially when you have like people you're playing with, especially those shooter games. I think that sometimes when you're, I remember growing up too, like, I grew up and we had an Xbox growing up, and so we were able to, play and different things. And like the reality is, I'm hanging out with my friends most of the time when I'm playing, right? Which is weird because I'm sitting alone in my house or whatever, but I'm actually just hanging out with the buddies. So super cool, man. Charlie, I appreciate you being here. Thank you for coming on the show. If people wanted to reach out to you and connect with you, what would be the best way that they can do that?
Absolutely LinkedIn, because it's really the only place that like social media wise that I'm hanging around the most, I suppose. So yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn, and I have my website where I post about Canvas apps, so charlessexton.com. So if anyone's interested in Canvas apps, and sometimes I'll post things that I haven't found anywhere else on the internet. It might be something that I've discovered, some kind of cool tip or trick, usually because of my web development backgrounds, that I figured something out. So yeah, that would be the place to go, is LinkedIn, to talk to me.
For sure. Awesome. Yeah, both of those, your LinkedIn and your blog or your website, down in the description down below if you want to check that out. Thank you to you for sticking that in the video. My name is Griffin Lickfelt, the host of Citizen Developer, and I'm excited to connect with you in the next one.